Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we explode the many modern myths and where we try and give people a head start towards truth, to evaluate important issues, to make lifestyle choices so we can thrive. Hi there, I'm your host, Nigel Howitt, and on the show today, how to be healthy. How can we achieve health? All right, it's a big topic, this one. But step one is to think outside the box and explode some of the really important foundational myths around health. It doesn't get any more important than this, ladies and gentlemen, because health is the fundamental base requirement for a successful life on Earth. Nobody wants to be having a stroke in 5 or 10 years' time. Nobody wants to be developing abdominal obesity, diabetes. Nobody wants to have an appointment with dementia. These really are important issues, and it's important to note that the context of today is that all of these health issues are in epidemic proportions. More and more people are sick and overweight. More and more people are in trouble with their health, and this is not going away. It's getting worse. But the good news is we know why that is the case. Health is not a great big mystery, and indeed, one of the first things to say is that the achievement of health is simple. Okay, there are simple things that can be done, as in it's within the reach of everyone. It's not complicated or difficult to understand. It's not easy because the actual achievement of it, the putting it all together, the implementing all of your knowledge is rather challenging. We live in a world where there are so many wonderful tastes to tantalize our taste buds, and we're all encouraged to eat solely for taste as opposed to for conscious nourishment. And there's also so much disinformation out there. So the point of this episode is to bust some of these foundational myths and clear the road, as it were, for us to start upon a fresh course of how to be healthy. So that is the purpose of this episode. It's to smash what I refer to as these duff steers, or these many modern myths within the matrix. And health, as well as being so foundationally important to a successful life, is possibly the area with the most disinformation in it. There is just so many contradictions. So I'm going to nail down a few of them. And please initiate your own process of inquiry, your own studies, your own research, and do delve into these things, because the truth is out there. The age of the internet has really brought that home loud and clear. So step one then is, the first myth is that your doctor can help you with your health. And in a nutshell, he can't. It's a knee-jerk response, certainly from my parents' generation, and I think most of us are ingrained with it, this idea that your doctor can help you with how to be healthy. Our doctors, well-meaning though they are, and of course there are exceptions, but that generally speaking, they're trained in the art of identifying symptoms, identifying conditions, diseases, and matching them up with specific drugs, diagnosing and then treating with drugs. The doctors are educated by the pharmaceutical industry. It wasn't always the case, but it is the case now. It's evolved that way over about the last 100 years. And doctors receive a tiny amount of information about things like nutrition, and they're just not the people to go to explore the fundamentals of how to achieve health. If we're in an accident, if we need to be stitched together, if you need any kind of acute trauma, injury repair, then the hospital is a great place to go. And this is a marvelous use for all of this health-related technology. But in my view, it doesn't go much further than that. And all of the technology around how to be healthy, which we'll explore as we go through, with a little summary at the end, is available to us. And the person not to go to is your doctor, particularly in the UK here, and I think largely in the States. my doctor historically has routinely prescribed antibiotics for all manner of conditions and ailments. And unfortunately, even viral infections and fungal infections are prescribed. Excuse me, that's my little cat down there on the floor. We're prescribed antibiotics to deal with these conditions, and that is just nonsense. We now all know about the various strains of bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. And this is due to the incessant use of them by the medical fraternity, as well as, and possibly even more so, because of the of feeding them routinely to animals. We must get away from this whole culture of widespread indiscriminate use of antibiotics. It is really not the way forward. But this is the way that our GP, our general practitioner here in the UK, or your medical doctor, is generally trained. So myth number one is that you can go to your doctor to find out a bit about being healthy. No, that's not true. Myth number two is that a balanced diet of 3 square meals a day is a good idea. Now, we must get away from this. The eating myth, there's a few wrapped up here. The idea of a balanced diet, for a start, is nonsense. It's about balancing a certain amount of good food with a certain amount of bad food, the stuff we call treats, which really we shouldn't do that. It's eating a balance of good and bad stuff, which is insane. It means eat as much poison as you would eat healthy food. The whole concept, balance sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, yes, he's in balance, oh, beautifully balanced. Not with a diet. Find out the foods to which the human genome is adapted, and more specifically to what your nutritional type or your own bodily requirements are best suited to, and eat that diet. And the idea of eating 3 meals a day plus snacks is really a myth put out there by the food industry that suits ever growing consumption levels. It's absolutely not necessary to eat 3 meals a day. I don't routinely eat more than 2, sometimes 1 meal a day. Snacks, yeah, as appropriate, really. But we're certainly encouraged to overeat, and the idea of 3 square meals a day is not necessary. Don't eat a balanced diet. There's a whole load of information about eating the right food. It's our most powerful tool, ultimately, for crafting our own optimal health. And it's the most challenging aspect, I think, of the whole picture. The most powerful, but the most challenging. To change your diet, to reject processed food, to reject sugar, to minimize and reduce, phase out wheat products, to minimize and phase out all of these unhealthy oils, the vegetable oils, to get back to healthy fats. There is a huge benefit to be reaped in completely changing your diet to one that actually supports health rather than actively undermines it, which is the state of affairs for most of us. So if we can reject these conventional myths about the low-fat diet, all of this sort of stuff, and be prepared to unlearn everything that you think you know about eating and start from the ground up. That's the approach I took some 5 or 6 years ago. And that has been the only way to go, to literally start again and revisit all of these assumptions. This leads us on to the myth number 3, and that is that sugar is okay. Okay, sugar is not okay. It is a myth that we can eat sugar, confectionery, and all of this degree of added sugar within our food is a myth. It's not okay. It's a huge contributor to our epidemic of health, of modern chronic diseases, not least type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and so forth. From the huge amounts of sugar that we ingest, it's absolutely unsustainable. And the fact that we treat ourselves with sugary things, with cakes, with sweets, with biscuits, and we treat our children. I mean, this really is crazy. We need to try and create a new culture where we don't treat children with a poisonous substance that's known to be more addictive than cocaine and hugely harmful to human physiology. It's just insane for us to perpetuate this cultural idea of a treat wrapped up in the form of sugar and a piece of poison. So really important that we explode that myth that sugar is not okay. And avoiding sugar in the form of cakes, sweets, biscuits, pastries, fizzy drinks is great. That's a good first step, and I advocate everybody try and do that or succeed in doing that. But when we start to step this on and we learn a little bit more, we find out that potatoes and pasta and rice and spaghetti and lasagna and all of these things, bread, are sugar. They're sugar. They start to be broken down by the amylase in our saliva, and almost literally by the time they get to your stomach, they are simple starches and sugars, with all of the commensurate effects that has on the human body. Raises the blood sugar level up. Insulin has to be driven up in order to bring the blood sugar level down, and usually it pushes it down too much, so you get a sugar crash and you have to reach for a sugary snack or something by 11 o'clock. The cycle continues. 3 meals a day with a high refined carb intake and a high refined carb intake and sugary snacks leads to this disastrous cycle with insulin signaling the body to store fat, the root of obesity and all sorts of health problems. So ultimately, we need to be aware that sugar is in many forms, especially in these wheat and other things I just mentioned. It's very encouraging to note that cancer cells cannot metabolize sugar. So to the extent that we make our body a sugar-free zone, to the extent that we reduce our dietary intake of sugar and routinely reduce our blood sugar level, perhaps with cyclical ketosis or maybe even fasting, the extent to which we do this, we make our body an inhospitable environment for cancer cells. I mean, isn't that brilliant news? We predispose ourselves away from getting cancer by reducing sugar. And nobody tells you that when they're shaking their Macmillan Fund, please support UK cancer research and all these other crazy things that I see. Nobody will tell you that. And there are numerous ways to deal with cancer. Cancer, that's another myth, that cancer is incurable. But anyway, sugar feeds it. So myth number 3 is that sugar is okay. It's not okay. You really want to try and minimize or remove as much added sugar from your diet as possible. And some seasonal fruit, I think, is acceptable, but you even have to be careful with that. Myth number 4 is that organic food is an expensive indulgence or a luxury. It's not really necessary. I say that this is completely not true, and for very good logical reasons. There are myths put out about organic produce, such as you can't taste the difference, or there's no greater nutritional content in organic food, so what's the point? And this is nonsense. This is complete red herring. This has got nothing to do with the central principle that, by definition, organically produced food or organically grown produce, by definition, is less toxic. It has less toxic residues in it. It has more stringent guidelines laid down around its production. You can't spray glyphosate willy-nilly all over your vegetables and call them organic. So therefore, you and I know that when we buy organic fruits and vegetables, or vegetables and fruits, vegetables far more important than fruits, as alluded to a moment ago, we can be confident that the organic certification means less toxicity. It doesn't, unfortunately, mean no toxicity at the moment. It's very difficult to routinely ingest no toxicity. That is very, very challenging. with the degree of general environmental pollution. But you can be sure when you buy something that's organically certified, it's going to not have had a bunch of toxic chemicals sprayed all over it during its growth and indeed possibly processing and preparation. So organic is an essential component of your eating habits if health is what you want. Smash through that myth. Number 4, organic is unnecessary. Organic is essential. The 5th myth that we need to be aware of is that classic old one that fat makes you fat, and its twin brother, cholesterol causes heart disease. Neither of these are true, and in fact they're scientifically shown to be not true. The hypothesis contradicts the facts of reality in a very literal sense. But nevertheless, this story has dominated mainstream dietary and nutritional wisdom for decades. It's amazing how the lie has gone on so long. But anyway, all the latest research explodes these myths. The propaganda and the disinformation have been so relentlessly drummed into us over these decades that many of us still find it hard not to instinctively push those fatty bits of meat to the edge of the plate and by implication rejecting them. We must turn that around and see that the right kind of fats, healthy fats, are absolutely essential for the human diet. And similarly, we must know what sort of fats to avoid. If you're in England, fish and chips fried in a nasty vegetable oil that's been used over and over again for 3 months. This is rancid, dreadful oil. You shouldn't consume that. You shouldn't consume things like rapeseed oil in the form of canola or safflower oil. These vegetable oils are toxic by the very production process, let alone being an inappropriate source of a fat profile, lipid profile. They're largely omega-6s, and they tend to increase inflammation within the body. So it's very important to know our fats, and I've got a whole episode about knowing your healthy fats with Sally Fallon Morell. But the truth is that your body loves to burn fat, and it will burn it as a preferential form of fuel. And this happens to be a massive step in the direction towards health. Although the body burns sugar preferentially while it's in the diet and while there's an excess of it in the bloodstream, the truth is that when our bodies make that switch over into metabolically burning fat as opposed to sugar, it unlocks a whole load of amazing health benefits. Just a few in short summary here: better mental clarity, improved immune function, lower levels of triglycerides in the blood, and reduced risk of heart disease, improved gut health, reduced aging, better dental health, and in general, the avoidance of illness, a more fired up immune system, if you will, that's firing on all cylinders. So another myth there is conversely that we need some dietary sugar for the brain to be able to burn glucose, and this is not true. You don't need that dietary sugar. The brain does burn some glucose. It's produced by the liver on demand. So dietary sugar is out, and bring in the appropriate healthy fats. So closely related to the myth about fats making you fat and being bad for you, and the myth that you should be eating a low-fat diet, which is completely untrue, is its twin brother that cholesterol causes heart disease. And this is not true. There is a form of cholesterol, the small particle-sized, low-density lipoprotein, the LDL, that is problematic. But to use an overall level of cholesterol measured in the blood is a meaningless biomarker. It tells us nothing without knowing the profile of what's high density lipoprotein, the HDL, and what's low density, and as mentioned, these particle size profiles within it. That is the only way the information becomes of any use. And it's interesting to note that the most damaging cholesterol particles, these small, tiny little ball-bearing-like LDL particles, these increase in the bloodstream to the extent that we eat wheat products and sugar. So this is very important, couple of dots to join. So really, cholesterol is not the enemy. Again, it's wrong diet is the enemy. Cholesterol per se is required by every living cell. And the extent to which we eat less of it in our diet, our liver simply produces more of it anyway. So it's all about consuming the right food. And it comes back to the need for choosing our eating habits around health and well-being as well as taste, and not just about taste. That's a really important point. And so those are myths 5 and 6. The 7th myth that we must explode is that tap water is safe to drink. This is a really important fundamental for anyone starting out on a path to health. Municipal water supplies in many areas should not be considered safe to drink. They're a cocktail of toxins, pharmaceutical drug residues, birth control pill residues, antibiotic residues from prescribed medications, pesticide residues, glyphosate in there, mercury, chlorine, and even in some areas, fluoride. So none of this has any place in the human body, and none of it should be ingested in any amount. So it's really important to secure a source of water, a reliable, pure, clean source of water, whether that be from a well or whether it be through some sort of filtration method. You must give attention to your source of water. It's really important. You don't want to literally be drinking diluted poison. So, hotly straight on from that, myth number 8 is that, this is the bad news that no one wants to hear, that electromagnetic fields are nothing to be concerned of with regards to human health. The myth is that your mobile phone is perfectly safe to use and that you can hold it to your ear as much as you like with no consequences, or the myth extends into the fact that we consider it okay for classrooms where children gather and spend a lot of their time can be saturated with a buzzing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all of these other pulsed microwave electromagnetic fields. This is not without consequence to the human body, and that's very, very important to know. Nobody wants to give up the benefits of these amazing modern devices. Of course, the pocket computer, the smartphone is incredible. We've just got to figure out ways and patterns of usage that don't compromise our health. And I believe that eventually the technology will evolve to a place where it won't actually harm us. But unfortunately, we're not there at the moment. It's important to note that it's not the thermal effects that are concern, and traditional defence of the mobile phone industry and the whole industry, all the vested interest, is that the thermal effects are negligible. But it is not the thermal effects that are the issue. It's the non-thermal effects due to the activation of these things called voltage-gated calcium channels. Each body cell has numerous means of communication and ingesting and expelling various things through the cell membrane, and these voltage-gated calcium channels literally allow calcium into the cell. They happen to be triggered by this pulsed microwave radiation in the form of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and many other things, which causes a disproportionate flooding into the cell of calcium. The excess calcium then triggers a series of causal events which cascade into the upshot being excessive oxidative stress within the cell from reactive oxygen species as well as reactive nitrogen species. And this causes DNA damage, mitochondrial damage, and so forth. You've got accelerated aging and many other negative health effects. It's been shown that because the heart cells, for example, have a higher concentration of these VGCCs within these specific cells, the pacemaking cells, this can be a reason why a lot of people suffer erratic heartbeat and various other atrial fibrillation, these sorts of conditions of irregular heartbeat. This could well be tied in with their usage of Wi-Fi, mobile phones, etc., etc. So this is really important. It's a massive issue because, with children using devices on their laps, things like iPads in Wi-Fi mode, that potential DNA damage to the cells in the ovaries of young girls literally can be killing our grandchildren if we allow our young children endless exposure, unlimited exposure to these Wi-Fi fields. There are knock-on effects. There's a cause and effect that's going on there, and we need to know about it. The risks of Wi-Fi use, of mobile phone use, must be known so we can make informed choices as conscious, rational people. We must be able to know what the effects are of these things. And another solution can, of course, be hardwiring our houses for Ethernet connection on our computers instead of taking advantage of the Wi-Fi, the portable phones and things like that. If anybody still uses them over and above a mobile, definitely worth removing. So that's EMFs. Nobody wants to hear that, but that's a very, very important component of health moving into the future, is the avoidance of them. I must apologise for my cats making all this noise in the background. Two young kittens. The next myth that we have to address, it's really important, is that your dental health doesn't affect your overall health. Most people put their issues of dentistry, their fillings, their dental health into a separate box entirely. For some reason, there's no connect between the doctor and the dentist in our modern health culture, and this really doesn't make any sense at all when you look into the implications of modern toxic dentistry. So, as it turns out, there are many factors why you want to be really, really aware of your mouth and how it's treated and how cavities are dealt with, wisdom teeth extracted, etc., because there's a lot of potential high impact for your health. For a start, amalgam fillings, if anybody still has them in their teeth, should be removed. They're continuously leaching mercury vapor 24/7 into your immune system from your teeth. I mean, this is just obviously not a good idea. No matter how much your dentist or the General Dental Council here in the UK says it's okay, no problem with health, absolutely fine, doesn't matter. The facts are that mercury is a neurotoxin and you don't want it leaching out of your teeth. And every time you chew and have a hot cup of coffee, you hugely increase that ingestion of mercury. It has to be noted that as soon as mercury amalgam from filled teeth is extracted out of the tooth and it's put onto the bench in the dentist's lab, or in the dental surgery, I should say, it then becomes toxic waste and it must be disposed of with special health and safety procedures to protect the dentist and the dental nurse. That tells us something. It's not okay if they're in your mouth. Similarly, crowns. A crown is generally a dead tooth that has the root drilled out and filled with some nasty toxic something to kill the tooth if it isn't dead already. And then the dead tooth is left in the jaw. It's left to develop a bacterial colony of invading bacteria who will find the honeycomb structure of the tooth a perfect environment to build a city of bacteria. And their toxins and waste products then leach into the body and load our immune systems. The only thing to do with a dead tooth is to have it extracted. Not particularly pleasant, but root canals should be pulled out of your jaw. Most wisdom tooth extractions are performed with little care and attention paid to remaining bacteria getting into the wound site. And in many, many cases, this presence of bacteria goes on to form something called a focal infection in the jaw, up in the top of the jaw, or the lower jaw is appropriate, and the infection literally lives in the bone and will grow and develop a colony of bacteria that will literally eat a hollow in the jawbone. And over a period of decades, it might take 3 decades before this starts to give problems and result in trigeminal neuralgia or affecting the nerves going around the face or in some way causing other toothache problems. So it's really important that these focal infections be dealt with by a decent dentist. Anyway, the point being, we must make the link between our dental health and our overall health be a conscious and unified part of our health awareness. It just cannot be otherwise if it's optimal health we seek. A related myth in here is fluoride. It must just be said that fluoride is not any great protector of dental health. It shouldn't be in the toothpaste your children use or that you use. Fluoride has no place in a dental health plan. More like reduction of consumed sugar should have. Don't worry about fluoride. Don't get fluoride treatment. Make sure you have a fluoride-free toothpaste. Fluoride has all sorts of neurological detrimental effects and was known to be experimented with by the Nazis on concentration camp inmates in order to make them more placid. So that's undisputed. Go ahead and check that out. Think through all these implications. You don't want to be drinking fluoride. So that brings us up to the 10th myth to look at today, and that is the issues around vaccines and immunity. Now, there's a strong myth out there that's heavily plugged that you need vaccines in order to achieve immunity, and they have this concept of the herd immunity and the desirability to vaccinate everyone in order to confer this immunity on the human population. It's completely misfounded, and when we look at the whole issue rationally and calmly, and we weigh up, well, what is it we're injecting into the young babies, even young children and adults for flu jabs? What are the substances we're actually putting into the body? What effect does that have? Do we really need that? Is that a very sensible thing to do? Are there other ways of supporting the immune system? Yes, there are. Are there other ways of developing immunity? Yes, there are. There are huge costs with thimerosal and with formaldehyde and aluminium, various other things that find their way into vaccines. There's huge questions, I should say, around that being the most efficacious way to safeguard the health of young babies, young people. There are even hepatitis B vaccines administered to newborns, or 2 months, I think. The idea that a sexually transmitted disease, or one that you can catch through sharing drug needles, the idea of inoculating a young baby against such a condition is very difficult to support for me, really. But anyway, so the vaccine debate is very heated, it's very passionate, because when people find out good and valid reasons to avoid such a practice in order to safeguard the best interests of their children, they become very passionate about wanting to share that when they see that as the truth that I believe it is, and that the facts can be seen by anyone who wants to look at them. But nevertheless, the propaganda is at full volume against this. Check out an episode I did with Dr. Andrew Wakefield on the issue of autism and vaccines, the MMR. So it's a hot debate. As far as I'm concerned, the evidence clearly shows, to me, not to vaccinate my children. That's the conclusion I drew, and I've never had any of my children vaccinated, and I and my wife both avoid vaccination, flu jabs and all that, based on the evidence we've seen. So there you go. I hope this helps. These are 10 basic myths that we have to put behind us if we want to be healthy. If we want to really supercharge our immune systems, and you can, gain better mental clarity, be agile, strong and healthy, and mentally astute into our old age, which I believe we can, but we have to plan for it. We have to look ahead sensibly, and I hope smashing these myths can at least get interested people on the right road, immediately pointing in the right direction. If you want to change your diet, change it in the right direction. Do avoid the things that will best serve you by avoiding, and don't get it all wrong and eat a low-fat diet or something crazy like that. So anyway, I do hope busting these 10 myths has helped. And do look for further information on the website, www.lawfulrebel.com. And thank you very much for listening. And please join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix. Change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.